Anticipation is mounting ahead of next year's elections, and while the country has seen a decline in voter turnout in recent years, experts believe that this can be addressed through teaching learning initiatives. The increase in non-voters has been attributed to government's failure to fulfill its promises, among many other things. Let's make sense of it all for you now. Bring in Naledi Modise from the Northwest University. She's also an expert on voter behavior and joins us via our telephone line this morning. Naledi, it's great to have you with us. Thanks so much indeed for making time for the AM report. It's a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? At least for us who aren't studying voter behavior. On the one hand, there's this palpable increase in dissatisfaction amongst the electorate. But that doesn't translate with people going to vote. Instead, many stay away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and good morning to the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. So this is because South Africa is, the new democracy, and we're developing our own political culture. And for a long time, the aspirations of the majority of South Africans were placed or were viewed against one political party, which was the ANC. So when they then underperform in governance, then that leads to a frustration that leads the people who are frustrated and unhappy with the behavior or with the governance of the ANC to turn away from the electoral process because they don't see the value of their vote or the contributions that, or the changes that they anticipated when they elected officials into office.
And is there any way of telling who essentially benefits from that context? Because if memory serves, I think during the local government elections, we were told that if voters don't come and vote, it's actually the governing party that suffers the most, because typically those who are casting their ballots will be desperate for an alternative. Does that correlate with your own studies?
Not necessarily. So when people don't come out to vote, in the urban, so there's an urban-rural divide in the sense that in the urban areas, when people are frustrated because of their access and higher levels of education, they tend to go out and vote for, or they seek alternatives more than those in the rural areas. And so what you see is in the urban areas, there is a definite move away from voting for a political party that underperforms. There is a seeking of an alternative representation. However, in the rural areas, in which is where the ANC enjoys the majority of the support, when fewer people turn out to vote, and the people that do turn out to vote still hold partisan loyalties to the ANC then benefits.
There's this concept, right, that makes sense. There's this concept of democratic dividends, which is at the heart of whether or not someone even believes in the electoral system to begin with. I wonder to what extent you reckon we've done enough to explore what those dividends look like, especially because it seems that given your socioeconomic background, perhaps you see this thing differently.
So the democratic dividend is a strong indicator of why people go out to vote or not. And this is also just because of our history of, apartheid segregation and underdevelopment for the majority of South Africans. So within the electorate themselves, there's a strong focus. And when we talk about, these democratic dividends, they are a range of issues. But particularly in our context, it is a matter of those socio-economic deliverables, so it's the access to employment, the creation of employment, but also service delivery. And this is because it is important for the people who, under the apartheid regime, were denied the basics of a meaningful or a good life. So when we talk about those dividends, they can be a wide range of issues, but they really speak about social upward mobility and access to resources in society. And that is a significant driver of voter behavior and voter abstention in the country.
Yeah. Whenever we speak about voter behavior in this country, typically there's a lot of attention on young voters. And we've seen, I think, just in the past decade, very interesting trends about ways through which young people in particular are able to have a direct bearing on electoral outcomes in other parts of the continent even. I wonder to what extent you reckon we understand young voters in this country, because if I've got this right, in 2024, for the first time, we might have the largest body of post-94 voters taking part in general elections.
And so in the South African context, what has been interesting is that the 18 to 21 cohort tends not to vote in the first-time election. So the first time they would qualify to vote, they don't turn out to vote. But you see registration in the 24 to 35 cohort increase, and so an increase in voter participation among the youth. So between 18 to 21, we see a significant decrease or disengagement, but as they grow up, they tend to participate more within the elections. And what we're seeing is that there is a wave of consciousness that I find now among young people in South Africa who are feeling incredibly frustrated with the political happenings in the country and are looking for a change. So this has been voiced out, especially towards these 2024 elections, more so ever than we have seen in the past before. And I think that's a good indicator of where our youth is in terms of their willingness to participate in the electoral process.
Would you go as far as saying that young people perhaps in 2024 actually have the deciding vote?
Absolutely. If you look at the 2021 elections, 90% of young people I'm talking about that 18 to 21 cohort, did not even register to vote. So that is a huge number that could ultimately turn the wave or turn the tide in terms of who could assume office post-2024.
Sure. You said 90%, 90. That's a massive chunk. I mean, that's almost a crisis if you were to ask me. I mean, what does it say about the validity of the mandate that's given to whoever's elected if 90% of at least young people didn't take up the opportunity to have their say?
I mean, that is a crisis on its own. It puts us in a very precarious position because we understand that voter turnout and high voter turnout is desirable, particularly in an emerging democracy. So when people don't come out to vote, that really challenges the legitimacy of those elected into office. And it does create a situation of political instability in the country because young people do not feel, or people in general who did not vote, do not feel as if those people that they've elected that are in office are their representatives. So they don't have ownership of those that are in office and are the political leaders within the country.
And of course, on the flip side, those who are elected into office don't feel the need to account to a large constituency because as far as they're concerned, not many people came out to vote to begin with.
Absolutely. And we often hear after the elections, organizations will talk about, they're representing the will of the people. But if people are not voting for you, and even with the challenges that we've had with our electoral system that challenges the fact that, because we don't have a constituency-based system, political parties, members of parliament don't really feel the need to go back and account to the people in which they represent. And that becomes a challenge because it creates that further disconnect and divide between what is happening in the political sphere and what is really happening in society.
Very interesting insights indeed. Naledi Modise, thanks for giving us your take on this. Really do appreciate your time. Naledi is with the University of the Northwest as we continue to make sense of the political landscape in the lead up to next year's general elections.